A rising film star is threatened by a group of thugs who want to control his career and make him their puppet to showcase their power. But the film star fakes his death in one of their attacks and plots against them in shadows up until his musician girlfriend is abducted by them. The film opens with a rising movie star, Billy, who's currently shooting a sparring scene. Once the director cuts the scene, Billy is ambushed by a spotlight falling over him, but he misses it by an inch. Billy walks back to his trailer, where a thug named Steiner is already waiting for him. With a bittersweet demeanor, he asks Billy to consider contacting him, or else uncanny stuff like losing a limb or a spotlight accident can threaten his life. Billy becomes angry and smacks his face in order to kick him out. Afterward, Billy takes a cab to visit his girlfriend Anne, who is a successful musician, currently recording ear-soothing music in her studio. While Billy waits for her to take her out for dinner, Steiner joins Dr. Land and his thugs, who claim to be a syndicate, a management company, whereas they exploit and abuse their clients, mostly rich actors and fighters, into getting what they want. After getting updates from their thugs, Stick, Carl, and Hakeem, about their quests, he finds out from Steiner that Billy is rebelling against them and doesn't want to recruit their syndicate. Currently, Anne is driving away with Billy for dinner. She shows concerns about Steiner's syndicate since she's familiar with their dirty work. Suddenly, Steiner and his thugs surround Billy's car on their bikes. Billy walks out and whips them, but in the end, they gang up on him and put him to the ground. Steiner threatens him to give him a call, or else he'll be facing much worse consequences. Billy and Anne meet their advisor Jim, who reminds Billy of one of the incidents in which one of the syndicates named Hakeem nearly killed his client in the name of talking. Hence, he suggests quitting showbiz in order to get rid of the syndicate and live off the money he's made through his entire career. But Billy finds it irritating to ruin his career for a couple of snobs. When he walks out with Anne, she reminds Billy to visit his uncle, who's recently arrived from China and is now working at a Chinese opera house. Unbeknownst to them, the syndicate moles follow them on their bikes. When Land asks for updates on Billy, Steiner tells him he's certain of Billy's call after their little session, but Land orders them to make another likewise attempt. On the contrary, Billy visits his uncle Henry, who is getting ready for his show in the makeup room. Henry already knows about the syndicate that's been bothering him and suggests that he pays a price for his integrity like a man rather than backing out or letting the syndicate push him around. Simultaneously, the bikers barge in and begin hitting Billy. Once again, he puts up a good fight but gets beaten up by the end of it. Meanwhile, Steiner and Land are seen rigging their current client's match because the opponents have bribed them with $1.5 million. Carl pays them a visit and reveals that Billy didn't say a single word, which makes Steiner give up hopes on Billy, who currently calls Anne and asks her to meet him on the ferry. When she reaches there, he tells her to change her identity and go back to America while he deals with the syndicate. Anne worries for what Billy might do in her absence, so she doesn't leave and calls Jim to join her to Billy's final movie scene shooting, where the director hands the antagonists artificial bullets made out of paper. He advises them to shoot them in the air because they still hold the thresh to injure someone. Billy spots Anne and Jim before his scene, so he approaches them and angrily tells Jim to get Anne out of town. Unfortunately, one of the two antagonists turns out to be Stick from Syndicate, who shoots Billy in the face during his last scene and runs away. He is immediately hospitalized to a private hospital, where the doctor analyzes his injury and lets Jim know it has merely harmed Billy, besides ruining his face with a permanent scar. However, Billy has other things planned. He uses this opportunity to fake his death in order to plot against the syndicate. He asks Jim not to tell this to Anne in order to keep her out of danger. Jim arranges a fake funeral for him, in which thousands of people show up. When the crying Anne spots Steiner and his people, she walks to them and spits on their faces because she's convinced they're behind Billy's death. Jim pulls her out of there immediately and sends her home. On her way, she faints due to the shock of her lover's unpredicted death. Jim helps her to the hospital and goes to visit her 3 weeks later when she's fully recovered. He tries convincing her to go back to America, but she claims to stay for a while. When Jim leaves, Land, Steiner, and Stick pay her a visit and nicely ask her to let them manage her music career, but she recognizes Stick from Billy's set and screams at them all for being Billy's killers, due to which they immediately leave and head to Macau to collect money from the Chinese opponents. Meanwhile, Billy recovers in the hospital while drawing a beard on his picture to see how he would look in a disguise. Once recovered, he steals a beard and a mustache from his film set and heads straight to the port, where he asks a boat driver if he's seen the syndicate by describing their appearances. The driver guesses that they're headed to Macau, so Billy asks him to take him there. When they reach Macau, Billy spots the syndicates, so he asks the driver to wait for him while he goes after them in a taxi. They get stuck on a narrow street due to a parade, but eventually reach the Chinese, not knowing Billy is on their tail. Once they take the money and send the Chinese away, Billy climbs their bungalow's tall wall and ambushes Land, who's wandering in the lawn by the pond. He chokes him to death, but he manages to scream and call his bodyguards. Billy pulls his classic swinging kick move and renders the bodyguards unconscious. Soon, Carl shows up and puts up a fight with him, but Steiner straight up starts shooting at Billy, so he retreats and escapes from there. Subsequently, Land and Steiner try to figure out why the mystery man took pleasure in punishing the old man, instead of just finishing him off with a gun. Up next, Carl lands in the ring to fight his Asian opponent. Anne shows up in the audience with a gun in her purse. As she tries to shoot the syndicate with it, Billy spots her from the audience, now disguised as an old monk. He holds her hand from behind and tells her to let it go. By the time she looks back, Billy's long gone, but she recognizes his voice. Now Carl shows great reflexes during the match and wins it effortlessly. Everyone cheers for him and takes him back to his room, where he's surrounded by the media. When he goes to the bathroom, Billy comes after him and locks the door. He reveals himself and challenges him for a fight, during which he punctures a hole in his forehead only by launching multiple kicks simultaneously at a fast pace. When he dies, Billy shoves him in one of the lockers and runs away. Land immediately sends his men to keep an eye on Anne and Jim, who are currently hanging together. Anne shares with Jim that she's convinced Billy is alive after the encounter at the ring match and leaves, so the syndicate men follow her from a distance. On the other hand, Land suspects Billy is behind the attacks, so he sends Steiner to dig up his grave. Jim calls Billy to tell him about Anne's doubts, so he agrees to meet her in a school at night. The following night, Steiner locates Billy's grave and comes across a dummy of Billy, which confirms that he's alive and targeting them. Anne shows up outside the abandoned school building and finally comes in contact with Billy, who forces her to walk out of this mess and save herself, but she refuses to leave his side. The spying bikers report Anne's activities to Land, so he sends back up to tackle Billy, but he hears the bikers from afar and sends Anne away in her car. When updated on the scenario, Land tells his men to chase Anne instead and kidnap her so they can use her as bait. The boys go after Anne and abduct her from her parking lot. On the other hand, Steiner pays a visit to Jim, revealing that he's bugged his phone and heard his conversations with Billy. Hence, he tasks him to tell Billy to come to their told location and turn himself to them in order to save Anne. Jim delivers this news to Billy when he calls. On the contrary, Land asks Steiner to double their security after seeing what he did to his bodyguards earlier. Now, Billy immediately heads to location and finds Anne tied up inside a giant warehouse. She immediately tells him it's a trap since the thugs are right across the street. Billy barricades the door and hides Anne somewhere behind the giant boxes. When the men break in through the windows and split up to search the place, Billy ambushes a biker and steals his clothes to blend in. He then takes the rest of them down one by one, but Land sends in more bikers for backup. While Billy's fighting them, Stick shows up with his gun, so Billy bravely runs in his direction and snatches his gun, only to throw it away and challenge him in a hand-to-hand combat. Stick doesn't stand a chance winning from Billy and dies, but before that, Billy makes him spill Land's hideout location. He takes one of the bikes and heads there. Land has set up 3 of his men on 3 separate floors, which Billy defeats eventually and comes across Steiner. He tries to attack Billy with the blade under his cane, but Billy throws away his cane and beats him in a fair fight. He ends up pushing him off the stairs, ultimately killing him. With all the security defeated, Billy heads to the last floor, where Land has already slit his wrists and is dead. Billy finds it odd, so he goes near him to touch his head, which comes off right away. Billy realizes it's a trap, so he breaks the interrogation mirror window and goes after Land, who's trying to escape through the roof. Billy goes after him on the metal staircase, from where Land slips on his own and falls off the tall building. With his awful death, the film ends. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Thank you for being a part of Black's Movie Recaps. If these tales of mystery and intrigue sent shivers down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Black's Movie Recap for more bone-chilling narratives. Stay tuned, and until next time, stay captivated.